I bought my first lake house at 32, after years of grinding in software development. The place was perfect, 1,200 square feet of weathered cedar overlooking Lake Superior, with a private dock where I could watch the sunrise every morning. It needed work, but it was mine, completely mine. I paid cash for my stock options when my startup went public. The day I got the keys, I felt something I had never experienced before in my relationship with my parents' freedom. But when I video called them to share the news, I noticed something in my dad's eyes. Not pride, not happiness. Something closer to calculation. My mom immediately started talking about decorating, about spending summers there, about how they could help manage the property. I should have seen the warning signs. I should have understood what that look meant. Before I tell you how my own parents tried to take everything I worked for, I would love to know where you are watching from. Drop your location in the comments below. If you have ever dealt with family boundary issues, hit that like button, because you will understand why this story matters. And subscribe, because what happened next taught me the hardest lesson about blood versus loyalty. Now let me take you back to where it all started. I grew up in a middle-class family in rural Indiana. My father, Frank, retired early from an insurance company, where he had worked for 30 years. He was the kind of man who had opinions about everything and made sure you knew them. My mother, Patricia, everyone called her Patty, had been a housewife my entire life. She had this way of agreeing with everything my dad said while somehow making you feel guilty if you disagreed. I was their only child, which meant I carried the weight of all their expectations on my shoulders. Growing up, they made every major decision for me. When I wanted to study art in college, Frank told me I would major in computer science, because that is where the money was. When I got my first job offer in Chicago, he said it was too far, and I should work at the local bank instead. When I dated a girl named Amanda in my 20s, my mom kept pointing out everything wrong with her until I finally broke things off. I loved my parents, but I always felt like I was living their life, not mine. The turning point came when I was 28. I got an offer from a tech startup in Minneapolis, about 200 miles from home. For the first time in my life, I said no to my father's advice and took the job. Frank did not speak to me for a month. Patty called every other day crying about how lonely they were, but I stayed firm. That job changed everything. 3 years later, the startup exploded. We got acquired by a major tech company, and suddenly my stock options were worth real money. Not enough to retire, but enough to make a down payment on something I had always dreamed about, a place of my own, far from anyone's expectations or control. I spent months searching online, driving through Wisconsin and Minnesota, on weekends looking for the right property. Then I found it. The listing showed a small cedar cabin on the shores of Lake Superior, about 40 minutes from Duluth. It was not fancy. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen that needed updating, and a living room with massive windows facing the water. The photos showed peeling paint and an overgrown yard, but the bones were solid. The dock extended 20 feet into the lake. I could picture myself sitting there with morning coffee writing code for my side projects in complete peace. The asking price was $180,000. It was perfect. I made an offer the same day I visited. No contingencies, no asking my parents for advice, no second-guessing myself. 2 weeks later, I signed the papers at a title company in Duluth. When the agent handed me the keys, I sat in my car for 10 minutes just holding them. This was mine, not theirs, mine. That evening, I video called my parents to share the news. My mom answered, and I could see them both sitting at their kitchen table. I held up the keys and grinned. They congratulated me at first. Frank said he was proud I had made such a smart investment. Patty said it sounded lovely, but then the questions started. Frank leaned closer to the screen. "That is great, son. When can we come visit?" I told him any time I would set up the guest room first. Patty jumped in. "Oh, honey, we can help you decorate. I have such good taste." Then Frank said something that made my stomach twist a little. "You know, since you are so busy with work, your mother and I could spend summers there. Keep an eye on the place." I laughed it off, told them I appreciated the offer, but I had it handled. There was this silence, just a few seconds long, where Frank's smile did not quite reach his eyes. Then Patty changed the subject to something about their neighbor's dog, and we moved on. But that moment stuck with me. The next week, Frank called while I was at work. He asked detailed questions about the deed, about my mortgage, about property taxes. I explained everything was in my name, that I had put down 50%, and the mortgage payment was well within my budget. Then he said, "Well, if you ever need help with payments, we are here. Maybe we could be co-signers." I felt that familiar pressure, that old instinct to make him happy. But I pushed back. "I appreciate it, Dad, but I have got this covered." The line went quiet for a moment. Then he said, "All right, son," and hung up without saying goodbye. I spent the first month driving up every weekend to clean and do minor repairs. I replaced the kitchen faucet, patched some drywall, painted the bathroom. It was therapeutic, working with my hands, building something on my own terms. Everything felt peaceful for the first 2 weeks. Then on week 3, I arrived to find a package on the porch. I had not ordered anything. When I opened it, I found curtains, throw pillows, and a welcome mat, all in colors I would never choose. There was a note from my mom. "Just wanted to help spruce up the place, sweetie. Love you." I called her immediately. "Mom, I appreciate it, but I want to choose my own stuff." She sounded hurt. "Oh, sweetie, I just wanted to help. You have such a busy schedule." I felt guilty, but I held firm. "I know, but this is my space. I need to make it mine." She said she understood, but her voice had that edge that meant she definitely did not understand. 2 days later, Frank called. He asked if I had a spare key just in case of emergency. I hesitated. Part of me knew this was a bad idea, but he was my father. What if there was a fire? What if pipes burst in winter? So I agreed. I mailed him a spare key with a note that said, "For emergencies only." Looking back, that spare key was the biggest mistake I ever made. A month passed. I got pulled into a major project at work, a system migration that required late nights and weekend coding sessions. I did not make it to the lake house for 3 straight weeks. By the time Friday came around and my project lead told me to take a long weekend, I was exhausted. I decided to surprise myself with a spontaneous trip up north. The drive usually cleared my head. I stopped for coffee in Duluth, took the scenic route along the shore. The morning sun made the lake shimmer like hammered silver. I felt my shoulders relax for the first time in weeks. I was already planning how I would spend the weekend: sleep late, read on the dock, maybe do some fishing. When I pulled into the driveway around 10 in the morning, I saw my parents' car, a silver Honda Accord that I would recognize anywhere. I assumed they had driven up to surprise me, maybe heard through the grapevine that I was taking time off. I smiled, figuring we could have lunch together before they headed home. I walked up to the front door and used my key. The moment I stepped inside, I froze. Everything looked different. The furniture had been completely rearranged. There was a new couch in the living room, one of those overstuffed floral patterns my mother loved. The coffee table I had bought was gone, replaced with an antique-looking thing with carved legs. Family photos covered the walls, mostly pictures of my parents from their younger years. The whole place smelled like breakfast, like someone had been cooking bacon and eggs that morning. I heard voices from the back patio. When I walked through the kitchen, I saw my parents sitting outside in new wicker chairs I had never seen before. They had coffee mugs, a newspaper spread out between them. They looked completely at home. When my dad noticed me, he just waved casually. "Oh, hey, son, did not expect you today." Want some coffee? I stood there trying to process what I was seeing. "Dad, Mom, what is going on? Why are you here?" My mom smiled like I had asked the silliest question. "Oh, honey, we decided to spend a few weeks here. The weather has been so nice." I felt heat rising in my chest. "But you did not ask me. This is my house." Frank's face changed then. His jaw tightened. "We used the spare key you gave us. We thought you would be happy we are taking care of the place." I looked around at all the changes they had made. "You changed everything. You brought in new furniture. You did not even ask me." My mother stood up, wringing her hands. "We are just making improvements, Igor. The place needed a woman's touch anyway." I could hear my voice getting louder. I did not ask for improvements. I need you to respect my space. This is my house. I bought it. I own it. You cannot just move in and redecorate without talking to me. Patty's eyes filled with tears. After everything we have done for you, this is how you treat us. Frank stood up too, his face red. We raised you, son. We put you through college. We sacrificed everything for you. And this is the thanks we get. We cannot even enjoy our son's house. That phrase hit me. Our son's house, not my house. I felt something shift inside me then, anger mixing with clarity. I tried to keep my voice steady. You can stay through the weekend since you are already here. But next time you need to ask permission first. This is not your house. It is mine. Do you understand? They both nodded, but I could see they did not really agree. They just wanted to end the argument. I spent that weekend feeling like a stranger in my own home, watching them treat my space like it belonged to them. When I left Sunday evening, I felt relieved to get away. 2 weeks later, I called ahead before driving up on Saturday. When I arrived, they were gone, but the evidence of their occupation remained everywhere. I walked into the master bedroom and found it had been transformed. Their clothes still hung in the closet. Family photos sat on the nightstand. The whole room smelled like my mother's perfume. They had claimed it as theirs. In the kitchen, the refrigerator was stocked with food I had not bought. Frozen dinners my dad liked. Special crackers my mom always ate. A case of beer I would never drink. I opened the mailbox outside and found letters addressed to Frank and Patricia at my address. They had forwarded their mail here. Then I tried to unlock the front door with my key on the way out, and it would not turn. My heart started pounding. I walked around to the back door. Same thing. They had changed the locks. On my house. I had to use the spare key they had apparently left under the mat for me. I called my father immediately, not caring that it was almost 9 at night. Dad, you changed the locks. He sounded defensive. For security, son. There have been break-ins in the area. I was shaking now. This is my house. You cannot just change the locks without telling me. He cut me off. Do not be dramatic, Igor. We are family. What is yours is ours. Right, I heard my mother in the background. Tell him we are just trying to help. I took a breath. I want the original locks back by next week, and I want you to stop treating my property like it is yours. Do you hear me? There was a long pause. Frank finally said, "We will see," and hung up on me. I sat in my car, outside my own house, feeling completely powerless. They had taken over. Slowly, methodically, they had moved in, and they had no intention of leaving. The next month was a blur of frustration. Every time I called, they had an excuse for why the locks had not been changed back yet. My mother kept sending me guilt-tripping text messages about how they just wanted to be close to me, how they were getting older, and deserved some comfort. I started dreading looking at my phone. Then I got the letter from the county. It was a notice about a building permit application. The project description made my blood run cold. Major renovation, including addition of sunroom and deck expansion. The applicants listed were Frank and Patricia, with their last name. The address was my lake house. They were trying to get permits to renovate my property. Without my knowledge, without my permission. I stared at that letter for a full minute, my hands shaking with rage. Then I got in my car and drove straight up there. I did not call ahead. I did not warn them. I just drove. When I pulled up 3 hours later, I saw construction materials stacked in the driveway. Lumber bags of concrete rolls of what looked like roofing material. Part of my deck had been torn down. There was a pickup truck I did not recognize parked near the garage. I got out and walked around back. My parents were standing on what was left of the deck with a man in a work vest and hard hat. He had blueprints spread out on a folding table. I heard my mother saying, "So you want the sunroom facing the lake, right? And we can break through this wall here." I completely lost it. What the hell is going on here? All three of them turned. The contractor looked confused. My father looked annoyed, like I was interrupting something important. My mother put on that wounded expression she always used when she knew she was wrong. The contractor spoke first. You must be the son. Your folks here were just showing me where they want the addition. I stepped forward. I am not just the son. I am the owner. This is my property, and I did not authorize any of this. The contractor's face went pale. He looked at my parents. You said you owned this place. Frank tried to laugh it off. Igor, we were going to tell you. We wanted to surprise you with some improvements. I turned to the contractor. Sir, I am sorry you got dragged into this, but these people do not own this house. I do. Any permits filed under their names are fraudulent. I am going to need you to leave. He started packing up his blueprints immediately. Folks, I do not do family disputes. You sort this out. He was in his truck and gone within 2 minutes. Then I turned to my parents. Inside. Now. They followed me into the house. I was shaking with adrenaline. Once we were in the living room, I lost all control over my voice. You filed for a building permit. On my property. Without my permission. What is wrong with you? Frank tried to regain control of the situation. Son, calm down. We were going to surprise you. We are just trying to add value. I laughed, but it came out harsh. Add value, or take control. My mother stepped forward. Your father's retirement is not what we hoped it would be, honey. We made some bad investments. We just wanted a nice place to spend our golden years. And since this will be ours, eventually anyway, when you inherit it, we figured, why not start now? There it was, the truth. They saw my house as something they were entitled to, not as a gift or a loan, not even as something they could ask permission to use. They genuinely believed it was theirs, by right, because they were my parents, because they had raised me, because in their minds I owed them this. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself enough to think clearly. I want you both to leave, right now. Frank looked shocked. You cannot be serious. I have never been more serious about anything in my life. Pack your things and leave my property. My mother started crying in earnest now. You are choosing a house over your parents, over your family. I looked at her and I felt something break inside me, not heartbreak, something harder, like cutting through rope that had been strangling me for years. I am choosing my boundaries and my property rights over your sense of entitlement. I listed everything they had done. You occupied my house without permission. You changed the locks. You redecorated without asking. You forwarded your mail here. You filed for building permits in your name. You started construction. All of this without my consent. Do you understand how wrong that is? Frank tried one more time. We are family, Igor. Family shares. I shook my head. Family respects each other's boundaries. Family asks for permission. Family does not try to steal what is not theirs. You have 1 hour to pack whatever you brought and get out. If you are not gone by then, I am calling the police. They stared at me like they did not recognize me. Maybe they did not. Maybe I had never stood up to them like this before. Patty started gathering things, crying the whole time. Frank moved slowly, his face hard with anger. They threw clothes into suitcases, grabbed toiletries, packed up the food they had brought. When they finally stood at the door with their bags, Frank looked at me one last time. You will regret this, Igor. Family is forever. I met his eyes. So are property rights, Dad. My mother tried once more. Do not expect us at Thanksgiving. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I do not expect anything from you anymore, Mom. They left. I watched their car disappear down the long driveway. Then I stood alone in my house, surrounded by their furniture and their photos and their mess, and I felt something I had not felt in months. Relief. The first thing I did was call a locksmith. I had him come out that same day, even though it was Saturday, and I had to pay extra. I had every lock in the house changed. Front door, back door, garage, even the shed. Then I called the county office. I explained the situation, that my parents had filed for permits fraudulently. The clerk was sympathetic and told me how to file a formal dispute. The permits were canceled within a week. I contacted a real estate attorney in Duluth. She listened to my story and told me I could press charges for trespassing, fraud, and a few other things. But she also said family disputes like this rarely ended well in court. I decided to have her send a cease and desist letter instead. It arrived at my parents' house 3 days later, a legal document demanding they stop all contact with my property and threatening prosecution if they violated it again. Then I installed security cameras, 4 of them, one covering the driveway, one on the front door, one on the back patio, and one overlooking the dock. I set them up so I got alerts on my phone whenever they detected motion. I wanted to know if my parents came back. I needed to feel safe in my own home again. The hardest part was changing the address records. I had to contact the post office, make sure any mail forwarded to my address under their names was returned to sender. It felt so final, so cold, but it was necessary. The emotional aftermath was worse than I expected. That first week I felt lonely in a way I had never experienced before. Not because I missed my parents exactly, but because I was grieving. I was mourning the relationship I had always wanted with them, but never actually had. I kept replaying memories, wondering if I had overreacted, if maybe I could have handled things differently. Then my phone started blowing up. Aunts, uncles, cousins, I barely spoke to, all calling to tell me what a terrible son I was. My mother had called everyone in the family, painting herself as the victim. She told them I had kicked my poor elderly parents out of a house they were helping me fix up. She left out the part about changing locks and filing fraudulent permits. Family members I had not heard from in years were suddenly messaging me about how cruel I was being. My Aunt Carol called and spent 20 minutes lecturing me about honoring your parents. My Uncle Dennis sent a long email about family loyalty. Even my cousin, who I used to be close with, sent a short text. How could you do this to them? I tried explaining to a few people. I sent my cousin screenshots of the permit application, copies of the cease and desist letter. But she just said, "They are your parents, Igor. You could have worked it out." I realized then that most of my family would never understand. They saw me as the villain because I had set boundaries, because I had said no. My mother sent text messages almost daily. "Your father's blood pressure is through the roof because of the stress you caused. Do you want him to have a heart attack? Or, we just wanted to help you, and this is how you repay us." I blocked their numbers after 2 weeks. I had to. It was destroying my mental health. But I also started therapy. I found a counselor who specialized in family dynamics and boundary issues. In our 3rd session, she said something that changed my perspective. She asked me to describe my childhood, my relationship with my parents. As I talked, patterns emerged that I had never seen before. Every decision made for me. Every guilt trip when I wanted independence. Every time love felt conditional on my obedience. She introduced me to terms like enmeshment and emotional manipulation. She explained that my parents saw me as an extension of themselves, not as a separate person with my own rights and needs. She validated what I had done. "Igor, what you described them, occupying your home and filing permits without consent, that is not normal parental behavior. That is a violation. You had every right to protect yourself." I started reading online forums, found communities of people who had gone through similar things with their families. I discovered terms like narcissistic parents and golden child syndrome. I read stories that could have been written about my own life. For the first time, I did not feel crazy. I felt understood. The legal consultation helped too. My attorney confirmed that I had full rights to do what I did. She told me my parents could have been charged with multiple crimes, trespassing, fraud on the permit application, possibly even attempted theft, if we could prove they intended to claim ownership. She said I was being generous by not pressing charges. That validation from a legal professional helped me stand firm when family members pressured me to reconcile. About a month after the eviction, my parents made one last attempt. My security cameras caught them pulling up to the house on a Wednesday afternoon. I was at work, but I got the motion alert on my phone. I watched them get out of their car, walk up to the front door, try their old keys. When those did not work, my father knocked. Hard, then harder. My mother cupped her hands against the window, trying to see inside. I did not call them. I did not acknowledge them at all. After about 15 minutes, they gave up. My father went back to the car and returned with a piece of paper. He slid it under the door. Then they left. When I drove up that weekend, I found the note. It was written in my mother's handwriting. "We will never forgive you for choosing property over family. You have broken your father's heart. Do not bother reaching out when you finally realize what you have done. We are done with you." I sat on my porch and read that note 3 times. Part of me felt guilty. Part of me felt sad. But mostly I felt free. I wrote them a letter that I never sent. I just needed to get the words out. I wrote I did not choose property over family. I chose self-respect over manipulation. I chose boundaries over guilt. You never saw me as an independent adult, only as an extension of yourselves. This house represents my autonomy, my hard work, my freedom. And you tried to take that, not because you needed it, because you felt entitled to it. I burned that letter in the fireplace that night. Watching it turn to ash felt like closure. The first 6 months after I evicted my parents were the hardest of my life. Holidays were especially painful. Thanksgiving came, and I spent it alone at the lake house. I made a turkey breast for one ate it on the porch, watching snow start to fall over the lake. Christmas was worse. I had always spent it with my parents even when I disagreed with them about everything else. That first Christmas alone, I almost called them. Almost apologized. Almost said I overreacted. But I did not. Because deep down I knew I had not overreacted. I had finally reacted appropriately after a lifetime of accepting the unacceptable. The grief I felt was not really about losing my parents. It was about losing the fantasy of who I wished they could be. I was mourning parents who never actually existed. Parents who respected me, supported my independence, loved me without conditions. My therapist helped me understand that distinction. She explained that it is okay to grieve a relationship, even when leaving it was the right choice. She taught me that guilt is often a trained response, not a reliable moral compass. My parents had trained me from birth to feel guilty whenever I disappointed them. That training did not disappear just because I set a boundary. Slowly, I started reclaiming the lake house, not just physically but emotionally. Those first few visits after they left felt tainted. I would walk through rooms and see ghosts of their occupation. My mother's voice commenting on my furniture choices. My father's disapproval in every corner. But I pushed through it. I repainted the walls in colors I actually liked, deep blues and warm grays instead of the beige neutrals my mother preferred. I sold the floral couch they had brought and bought a leather sectional that fit my style. I hung art that meant something to me. Prints of national parks I had visited, a painting I bought from a local artist in Duluth. I built the deck extension myself. Not the sunroom they wanted, but a simple platform that extended further over the water. I spent weekends out there with my power tools measuring and cutting and hammering. Every nail I drove felt like reclaiming territory. When I finished, I bought a hammock and strung it between 2 posts. I spent entire afternoons there reading books, watching the lake change colors as the sun moved across the sky. I also started inviting people over. Real friends, people who respected my space. My coworker, Sarah, came up one weekend with her husband. We grilled out, drank beer, told stories around a fire pit I built. It felt good to fill the house with laughter that was not tense or conditional. My friend Marcus from college drove up from Minneapolis. We spent 2 days fishing, barely talking, just being comfortable in silence. These were the kinds of memories I wanted to build here. The lake community helped too. My neighbor 3 houses down was an older man named Harold. He was retired, spent his days woodworking in his garage. We started talking one morning when I was out on my dock with coffee. He wandered over, introduced himself, commented on the weather. Over time, we became friends. Real friends, not just neighbors. One evening, Harold invited me over for dinner. His wife made pot roast. We ate on their screened porch, and somehow the conversation turned to family. Harold told me about his own adult son, who had expected Harold to fund his lifestyle well into his 30s. Harold had finally cut him off financially, and his son had not spoken to him in 5 years. "The hardest love is loving yourself enough to say no, Harold," said, passing me the mashed potatoes. "Sometimes the people who should support you are the ones who need you to stay small. Do not let anyone, not even family, make you small." Those words stuck with me. I realized I had been making myself small my entire life to fit into my parents' expectations. This house, this space, it was the first time I had taken up the room I deserved. Through therapy, I came to understand my parents better, even if I could not forgive them. Their behavior stemmed from their own fears and insecurities. They had made bad financial choices and were terrified of their retirement years. They saw my success as something they had created, therefore, something they were entitled to benefit from. Understanding their perspective did not make what they did okay, but it helped me stop taking it personally. Their actions were about them, not about my worth as a son. I also recognized patterns in myself that I needed to break. I had spent my whole life people-pleasing, saying yes when I meant no, prioritizing others' comfort over my own needs. That pattern showed up everywhere. At work, I was the guy who always took on extra projects even when I was overwhelmed. In relationships, I dated people who took more than they gave. I attracted friends who saw me as a resource, not a person. Setting boundaries with my parents taught me how to set boundaries everywhere else. I started saying no at work when I was already at capacity. I stopped responding to texts from friends who only called when they needed something. I began recognizing red flags in dating. When a woman I went out with a few times made a sarcastic comment about how I should let her redecorate my apartment, I ended things. Old me would have laughed it off. New me heard the echo of my mother's voice and knew where that road led. About 2 years after the eviction, I met someone who changed everything. Her name was Sophia. We matched on a dating app, met for coffee, and talked for 4 hours. She was a nurse, sharp and funny, and completely comfortable with herself. On our third date, I told her about the lake house situation. I was nervous. I figured she would think I was cold or cruel for evicting my own parents. But Sophia listened to the whole story and then said, "Good for you. Seriously. That took courage." She told me about her own family, how she had gone no contact with her alcoholic brother after years of his destructive behavior. We bonded over understanding that love does not mean accepting abuse. That family is not a free pass to violate boundaries. 6 months into dating, I invited Sophia to the lake house. I had never brought anyone I was dating there before. It felt too sacred, too personal. But with her, it felt right. We spent the weekend cooking together, swimming off the dock, watching sunsets. She respected the space. She did not try to change anything or suggest improvements. She just appreciated it for what it was, my sanctuary. On our last morning there, we sat on the deck with coffee. She looked out at the water and said, "I understand why you fought so hard for this place. It is not just a house. It is your proof that you can build something for yourself." I almost cried. She got it. She understood in a way my parents never would. 2 years turned into 3. Family members stopped calling to guilt trip me. I think they finally realized I was not going to change my mind. My parents never reached out again either. Sometimes I wondered how they were doing. If Frank's blood pressure really was affected, or if that was just another manipulation. If Patty still painted me as the villain at family gatherings. But I did not wonder enough to break my silence. Then one day I got a message from my cousin, the one who had been judgmental at first. Her message said, "My mom told me Aunt Patty is in the hospital. Heart problems. They thought you should know." There was no pressure to visit, no guilt trip, just information. I sat with that news for a long time. I felt sad for my mother. I did not want her to suffer. But I also knew that visiting would open a door I had spent 3 years closing. It would send a message that my boundaries were not real, that they could be dissolved in a crisis. I sent a card to the hospital, a simple one, no long message. "Just wishing you a full recovery. Take care." I signed my name. No love, no explanation. Just acknowledgement that I had received the news and was not heartless. But I did not visit. I did not call. I maintained my boundary. My cousin texted back, "That was kind of you. She is doing better." I appreciated that my cousin did not push for more. Maybe she had learned something about boundaries too. About 6 months after that hospital scare, I received a letter from my father. It arrived at my apartment in Minneapolis, forwarded from some old address he must have had on file. The envelope was formal, almost like business correspondence. I opened it carefully. The letter was typed, not handwritten. It read, "Igor, your mother and I have had time to reflect on the unpleasantness that occurred 3 years ago. We believe it is time to move past this and restore our relationship. We understand that you felt we overstepped, and we are willing to discuss boundaries going forward. Please contact us so we can arrange a meeting to resolve this matter." It was signed, "Respectfully Frank." I read that letter 3 times looking for an apology. There was not one. No acknowledgement of what they had actually done wrong, just that I had felt they overstepped, as if my reaction was the problem, not their actions. They wanted to move past the unpleasantness, but they did not understand what the unpleasantness actually was. They saw it as a disagreement, not a violation. They were willing to discuss boundaries, but only now. Only after I had enforced consequences. Not because they respected my autonomy, but because they wanted access again. I did not respond to that letter. I filed it away in a drawer and went on with my life. My therapist asked me how I felt about it. I told her I felt peaceful. 3 years ago, that letter would have filled me with guilt and doubt. Now I saw it clearly for what it was, another attempt at control dressed up as reconciliation. They had not changed. They had just realized their first strategy did not work. Peace, I learned, does not always come from resolution. Sometimes it comes from acceptance. I accepted that my parents would never understand what they did wrong. I accepted that most of my extended family would always see me as the bad guy. I accepted that I would spend holidays differently than I had imagined. And in accepting those things, I found freedom. Now, when I drive up to the lake house, I feel only joy. The driveway is lined with flowers I planted last spring. The dock has new boards I replaced myself. The interior is exactly how I want it, comfortable, personal, mine. I have photos on the walls now too, but they are not of obligation. They are of choice. Sophia and me at a concert. My friends and me on a fishing trip. Harold and his wife at our joint 4th of July barbecue. I sit on my deck most mornings when I am up there, coffee in hand, watching the sun rise over Lake Superior. The water changes every day. Sometimes it is smooth as glass, reflecting clouds like a mirror. Sometimes it is choppy, and dark waves crashing against the dock. But it is always beautiful, always honest. The lake does not pretend to be something it is not. It does not demand anything from me. It just exists, and I get to witness it. That lake house taught me that sometimes protecting what you have built means disappointing people who think they are entitled to it. I learned that family is not an unlimited access pass to your life, your choices, or your property. I learned that the hardest boundary to set is with people who raised you, because you are taught from birth that you owe them everything. But I do not owe anyone my peace. I do not owe anyone my autonomy. Those are mine to give or withhold as I choose. I still talk to my therapist, sometimes less frequently now. She told me recently that I have done the hardest work a person can do, choosing myself when everyone else wanted me to choose them. She said most people never get there. They spend their lives contorting themselves to fit other people's expectations. I got lucky. My parents pushed hard enough that I finally pushed back. If they had been more subtle, I might still be trapped. Sophia and I are talking about moving in together. Not at the lake house. That stays mine, my retreat. But we are looking at places in Minneapolis, building a life together based on mutual respect and clear boundaries. She understands why the lake house has to stay separate. She does not take it personally. That is how I know this relationship is different from anything I had before. Do I regret what happened with my parents? I regret that they could not respect me enough to ask permission. I regret that they saw my success as their entitlement. I regret that I was raised in an environment where boundaries were seen as betrayal, but I do not regret protecting myself. I do not regret choosing peace over placation. I do not regret that lake house. Some people will never understand why you had to walk away. That is okay. You are not walking away from them. You are walking toward yourself, toward the life you deserve, toward the space where you can finally breathe without permission. I look out at the lake, now sunrise, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. I take a sip of coffee, perfectly brewed the way I like it, not the way anyone else thinks I should. And I am grateful. Grateful for this house that forced me to fight for myself. Grateful for the distance that gave me perspective. Grateful that I learned the difference between love and control before it was too late. That lake house saved me, not from my parents, but from losing myself trying to please them. And that makes every difficult moment worth it. So I have to ask you, have you ever had to set a boundary that cost you a relationship? How did you handle family members who thought you owed them more than you were willing to give? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one, and your stories help me remember I am not alone in this. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs to hear that boundaries are not betrayal. And subscribe, because I will keep sharing stories about choosing yourself when everyone else wants you to stay small. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it helps you find the courage to protect your own peace. You deserve a space that is truly yours. You deserve to build a life on your own terms. Take care of yourselves out there, and remember, you are not responsible for other people's disappointment in your boundaries.